Americans have mostly been sheltered from the energy crisis and fell in urgently and in some cases lethally in countries around the world. In many other places, especially Europe, the escalating situation is impossible to ignore, and it's gonna get a lot worse. This is All 24 News special coverage. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm your host, Karim Faz Zachary, and let's bring in our guest. I have with me here in studio Mr. Shuaib Boutamin, CEO of Randa Drill, and also a gas and oil expert. And via Skype from USA, we are joined live by Hamoud Salhi, who is a professor, associate dean of international education, and senior international officer at California University. So we might actually get directly into, let's say, debate. And I would love to start with you, Dr. Hamoud Salhi. Dr. Hamoud Salhi, can you hear me?
I hear you very well. Thanks for the invitation, Karim.
Thank you so much for joining us again. Mr. Hamoud Salhi, to be clear, the energy crisis is already here. And the West is saying that Russia is fully to blame. Natural gas prices topped $3,100 per, let's say, 1,000 cubic meters in mid-August, a 610% increase over the same time last year, as measured by the Dutch TTF market. At this price, many power stations cannot afford to operate for long. As a consequence of the rising cost of the input fuels, benchmark electricity prices in Europe have surged almost 300% in 2022, breaking all the records. Taken together, energy prices are 10 times higher than a 5 years average. Now, according to your own perspective, Dr. Hamoud Salhi, is really Russia the only one to blame here? Isn't the West partly responsible? I mean, they should have foreseen that, especially that they were so sure to develop green and clean energy and refuse to engage in long-term investments and contracts and, let's say, contracts of purchasing gas, for example, from Algeria or other countries, for instance.
It's an excellent question, Karim, for obvious reason. You have, on the one hand, an immediate cause, which is the war in the Ukraine. Mm-hmm. That has changed all the equations, all the planning before. Prior to the Ukraine crisis, the Europeans and the American priority was the green energy. Their plan was to move ahead with implementing new rules and new regulation that would make the planet safer. Mm-hmm. There were, of course, several problems. The lobbyists against such move, also private interests of companies were also biggest challenge to this. The Ukrainian crisis changed that. It reversed that role by giving now more emphasis to resolving the crisis of gas supplies and using gas as a weapon to undermine Russia, what the Europeans see as a threat, and the United States. Those are the immediate cause, but deep inside there are seriously some major problems, and those major problems at what are driving this crisis more than anything else. We are on the verge of a major economic crisis, because when you look at, for example, the strategies that are adopted for climate change, for renewable energy, they were all limited and centered around states' own initiatives, meaning that the United Nations, the climate rounds that we've seen in Paris or Kyoto, all of those were left. The implementation of those decisions were voluntary and allowed the state to do what they perceive as their best interest. That national interest is another root causes for this. The second thing, on the European level, for example, you have different political positions positions. And most of the political positions on renewable energy, again, centered or are driven by national interests more than anything else. The lack of solidarity among the globe in general, whether in the United States or in other or the United Nations, all of this made this crisis more and more dangerous. In a way, what the Russian-Ukraine crisis did is bring this to the forefront and have the world deal with it. So as we look at this crisis, for example, we are all feeling the pain of higher inflation, of higher cost of consumption goods. But underneath that, there are the implication that, when you talk about gas, there are other industries that are affected, and those industries are likely to close because what you said, Karim, the bills, the electrical bills, for example, in Italy went from, what used to be $200, 200 euros a month in some shops to 3,000 euros. That's a huge number. I mean, it drives businesses to close down. So that is sort of there are deep-rooted roots to this crisis, and the Russian-Ukraine situation put that in the front. It put a sense of energy that the wars need to do it. Accordingly, a solution to this crisis remains or is to be political more than anything else.
Very nice indeed. Thank you so much for all these clarifications. And here, Mr. Shuaib Boutamin, how do you read the situation overall? How did Europe get itself or maneuver itself into this crisis?
Okay, first of all, good afternoon. First of all, I want to highlight something very important, that Europe today is living in a very gridlock situation. But if you allow me, just give me a couple of minutes, so just to explain what's really the causes of high spiking prices of oil and gas in the world today. From 2010, 2019, we had, let's say we had a glut of production of oil and gas in the market. And since from 2010, 11, 14, and exactly 2014, we had a boom of the shale gas and oil production in the US. That was affected directly the oil and gas market in the global market. So we had a huge production of oil, so we had less demand compared to the offer available in the market. So what created an imbalance in the energy offer and demand in the global market. So from 2014, we recorded oil Brent prices were like $26, $27. And we went with that cadency till 2019. But that period, before the COVID-19, we had like the existing fields of oil and gas started to deplete. They were really depleting. We didn't really record high discoveries in that time, and that really affected directly the return on investment. So what happened in that time, the fields were depleting. We had high demand, high production in the US, and by the time the United States, the share drillers in the United States, let's say the shareholders, they just like break the production, the investments, because the prices were really down, and they stopped investing in the oil and gas. So just a short period, we have been living we had the COVID-19. So the COVID-19, everything was really down. All manufacturing facilities on the oil plants were really down. It's crippled the economy all the world. But what's happened, it's not really a shutdown, but just was a break of the energy consumption in the world. And I'm talking about the big markets, Asia, United States, and Europe. So just after, we were expecting that the oil and gas prices to surge directly after in the post-COVID period, because we know everything was really down. There was like a layoff of employees around the world. So it's systematically, was logically that the world will come back to its activity that has really left in the COVID-19. So if I remember you, that in 2021, just I give you 2 months before, let's say December, 2 months before the war started inside Europe, the oil prices were in December was $87. That was a very good price for the oil producing countries. And we are looking for 60, 70, but we were recording. So this is a good sign that the prices were really high even before the Russian wars, Russian-Ukraine start in Europe.
Yeah.
This is a good sign. So let's go. We just go to February, start war inside Europe. That time, there is something I want to highlight in this equation. Europe, Russia was selling its gas in gaseous state. But after the war started the war, European leaders took, I think, just let's say wrong measures against Russia. It's like a person who fires triggers the fire in his foot. So, and the President Putin said that if you impose sanctions in Russia, they will return against you.
Absolutely.
And we live in that situation. So they imposed sanctions. By the way, Russia actually now, the Nord Stream 1 is only the live, it was, because yesterday was really completely a breakdown. Okay. So before this issue that happened yesterday, Nord Stream, they were really delivering, flowing only 20% of the same period last year. So what's happened? European leaders, they took some measures inside Europe and outside Europe.
Yeah.
One of the measures they took inside Europe, they tried to limit the consumption, the oil and gas, the energy consumption in the public places, let's say, and they put a plan, European Commission put a plan to limit or to decrease the consumption by 15%. The second thing they took is like they went directly to the renewable energy, like an alternative. But what happened the last winter? That what happened in the winter, that the wind didn't blow good in Germany, in many countries, to turn the turbines. So they didn't get very good energy rates, power generation from renewable energy.
Absolutely.
So that was a very big issue for
a bad move indeed.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we can actually delve deeper on that matter. I would like to get Hamoud Salhi involved in the conversation. Dr. Hamoud Salhi, the G7 countries have agreed to introduce a price cap. I mean, beside the sanctions, they wanted to introduce a price cap on purchases of Russian oil in an attempt to limit the Kremlin's ability to fund its war against Ukraine. How do you find Russia's counter move by deciding not to sell energy products to the countries who decided not to go down that road?
And that's what Joab was talking about, this miscalculation. And it's as if the European and the Americans continue to escalate the crisis, thinking that the more pressure they are putting on Russia, the more likely Russia will come to their terms, forgetting that the major problem is a political solution, is resolving the crisis in the Ukraine and returning back to the root causes of what started us in this mess many months ago, which is finding security guarantees, finding a security system in which Russia and the European would feel secure, both sides, not just the Europeans by using more power or using NATO expansionism to project themselves as deterring or to deter the Russians from their perspective or vice versa. That solution is gone from there. So when you go back to the G7, I think the miscalculation there is that, look, we have enough storage now, which is to a large degree very weak, because when on average the Europeans, Germany is at 83% in terms of storage. Europe is below that in many levels. So it's a short-sighted move, thinking that we are going to put pressure on Russia, not thinking that the Russians are doing the same thing, meaning that we are all expecting this winter, which is going to be very, very dramatic if the climate continues to be hot and cold later on. And so these are very, very serious questions that I don't think we are thinking in terms of a solution, a global solution or a European solution that will benefit the Europeans long term and even short term. The biggest challenge, and I think Shuaib mentioned it very, very clearly, is the prices. And these prices, you know, the families, the consumers are paying, are feeling this very, very, very bad. So when the Europeans take decision like putting a cap, and which very well they know the Russians would retaliate, and putting limit on usage of electricity, for example, because they are not translating into less payment or smaller bills, they are affecting the families. And that is the biggest challenge. So there is this huge factor. There is the social, humanitarian, if you want, impact on the average people on the one hand, and that will drive this crisis deeper and deeper. And then the biggest question is that these companies, with the Russians saying, look, you put a cap, I'm not going to sell anymore, and you deal with it. That translates into a closure of factories, a closure of even electrical plant, because they rely on gas. So those are short-sighted decisions, and I think what's happening, and we continue to see this, that the Americans and the European see these measures as a way to deter Russia or to stop Russia from what is doing in Ukraine, and in their mind this would weaken Russia. So if we stick a little bit longer, the Russians would in the end fail. But that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing the other way around.
Exactly. And just to put things into perspective, the G7 countries have agreed to impose a price cap on Russian oil in an attempt to stem the flow of funds into the Kremlin's war coffers, but keep crude flowing to avoid price rises. Let's follow.
In a dramatic escalation of the energy battle between Russia and the West, G7 countries intended a new blow to Moscow's energy windfall and decided on Friday to urgently cap the price of Russian oil.
Russia benefits economically from the uncertainties associated with the war in the energy markets. Russia is currently making high profits from the export of raw materials, such as oil, and we want to resolutely oppose this.
The attempt to stem the flow of funds into the Kremlin's coffers seems to be a mechanism complex to be put on place. Within few hours, Moscow hit back, announced an indefinite shutdown of its vital Nord Stream gas pipeline to Germany, citing malfunctions on a key turbine along the pipeline. But for the German manufacturer Siemens Energy, an oil leak alone cannot justify, from a technical point of view, the halt of the gas pipeline. European officials said Russia was cutting back its gas deliveries to punish Europe for its opposition to the war in Ukraine. Moscow denies using energy supplies as an economic weapon in retaliation for Western sanctions.
Те страны, которые присоединятся к потенциальному такому потолку цен, они не будут среди получателей российской нефти. Мы просто не будем на таких нерыночных принципах с ними взаимодействовать.
The tit-for-tat move comes amid growing fears that households in the EU will not be able to afford the cost of heating the coming winter, with governments under pressure to alleviate the pain of the resulting high inflation. Despite the United States saying priority in its energy exports will be for Europe, the old continent remains highly dependent on Russian energy, and an escalation in hostilities could exacerbate the economic crisis already facing the Western allies.
So I get back to you, Mr. Shuaib Butamin, regarding the tit-for-tat policy, as we have been following here in the report. And just as Hamoud Salhi highlighted, this is not actually working for the interest of Europe. And how is the reserve that Europe has, or at least they were building, they just announced like an 80%, stock. They reached 80%, before the deadline. But then we see here the gas being shut down from the Nord Stream pipeline number 1. So what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I think that everything is against Europe this year, especially this summer. So we had the climate change, we had the drought, we had the heat wave that was really hitting Europe and the countries.
Indeed.
So they got lower power generation from the renewable energies. So I believe that one of the GSET decision that has been really taken yesterday to cap the Russian oil and gas, I think this is a very wrong and mistake decision. Why? My question today is, why in 2014, when the oil prices dropped to $26, $27, why they did not take a decision to limit the prices they were going down, and to limit the countries producing of oil and gas. So this is part of the double standards of the Western, I believe. So if you want, part of selfish, if you want to protect yourself, but you have to protect the countries producing of oil and gas. I think that the G7 decision has been really taken yesterday is one of the measures, the outside measures Europe was really taking since last spring. One of the measures is that they have flown, many European leaders have flown to many countries looking to alternative of the Russian oil, but they know it's not really possible to get it in a very short time. That was not really possible, so they visited Qatar, Saudi Arabia, as Biden did, to Algeria, so many countries. So that was really a very tough situation for them. The second, they think, the second measure they were really thinking about is to get the nuclear, the Iran to come back to the nuclear deal. And I believe in this way, is Europe is the one is putting pressure to get it done against the United States. United States is taking profit of this crisis inside Europe because it's taking the lead of exporting gas to Europe, and took the lead of that and took it from Russia last June. So this is an example, and I believe that the US doesn't have a good really attention to go back to a nuclear deal, and this is a part of the measures Europe is willing to reach in the upcoming weeks. Regarding the stocks, the storage of the European countries now, this storage, let me tell you, it will be enough for 2.5 months. That's it. And today, with the breakdown we have really seen yesterday in Nord Stream 1, if we get more supply disruptions in the upcoming weeks, Europe may consume its reserve before January.
Wow.
This is a very... Yeah, this is a very, this is a thing I have to highlight. And I believe there is something is going wrong in this way. So the Europeans today, they have something very, something they have scared of freezing and a very dark night in the coming winter, because there is a shortage of gas. And there is less electricity generated in winter. But let me mention something very important. If Europeans talk about renewable energies, let me inform you that the turbine, power we get from the turbines of the wind, we get less power generation in winter. We get less generation, but the maximum, we get maximum generation from sun or from wind, we get maximum generation in the fall and the spring season. In these seasons, the problem for renewable energy, you have to stock that energy, and it's not really possible. So you have a glut, like let's say a glut of production. So this is the huge problem Europe will be facing this winter, that you have less power generation from renewable energy, you have disruption of supply from gas and Russian gas, and something very important, that the LNG, liquefied natural gas, they are getting mainly from the US, from Australia, and they have they have two main, or let's say three main pipeline flowing gas to Europe. They are from Norway, from Algeria, and a little bit from Netherlands.
And speaking of Algeria, I would like here to include Dr. Hamoud Salhi. Another point in efforts to diversify their energy supplies. I mean, the European Union has turned to Algeria, and as Mr. Shuaib Botamin was explaining to us, that of course the US found a very good market here to sell its energy products to Europe. which has been, identified as a promising source, especially Algeria, of additional supplies of natural gas, since other countries that have been identified as potential alternative supplier, like Algeria. Does Algeria here have the potential to help fill some of the gaps left by Europe's efforts to wean itself off Russian energy? And are there any obstacles?
Well, Algeria has taken a very sound strategy, turning this crisis into Algeria's national interest and also minimizing damages to the region, because it's very important to have a stable Mediterranean area, a stable environment. And this is recognized by the Europeans, by the American. The role of Algeria in this case is very well pronounced, and it has done a lot of good things to resolving or to sort of help ease some of the burdens that Europe is going. And it seems it's more about countries willing to reach out to Algeria than the other way around. For example, the Algerians have established a very sound strategy of cooperation, of multilateralism that benefit everyone with Italy. And that has had a big impact on Italy. Crisis. Italy is less affected today. So that role is very, very, very important to underscore. And Europeans have to come to terms with their political differences, with their vision of how they see Algeria. There are some crucial issues that are sort of impending the expansion of Algeria's sort of help to Europeans. Some of them are rooted in political decisions. Algerians are very, very strict on recognizing the sovereignty of states, respecting mutual interest. So if we are going to do a deal, it has to be beneficial. We've seen this a little bit with how France is approaching its Algerian relationship. So from that perspective, Algeria has played a major role in providing some help to the region, and I think it will continue in that perspective.
It is understood, Dr. Hamoud Salhi, vis-a-vis the politics and all. But then my concern here, I think that it is a little far-fetched dream when it comes to investment, because investing in energy takes time, doesn't it? And seeing the geopolitical situation, the instability in the Sahel region, a lot of investors would think that it is a little risky actually to invest in gas, for example, in the Saharan desert. And at the same time, I don't think that investors would really find it wise to perhaps, while they are at the climax of the crisis in Europe, they would put a lot of money, investing in such sources. Don't you think, Dr. Salhi?
I agree with you 100%, and it is that the right way to look at it. What we've seen, what we need to do, or the Europeans need to do, is to take this crisis and as an opportunity to look into the serious crises that are facing the area. You cannot ask the Algerians to continuously produce and help you, work with you, and then ignoring the fact that Algeria is being threatened by instability in its neighboring countries. You cannot continue to get involved in the Libyan crisis, undermine its stability, or for that matter, Mali, or any other part of the African continent, without seeing that as causing some of the problems to Europe. So a comprehensive, fair, and solution, and I may add a transparent solution to the crisis that these countries are facing is very, very essential. Europe has to sort of strip itself from this old colonial mentality, and it's me first. You know, the way the Europeans react to the Ukrainian refugees, it speaks volume about their intent or their philosophy worldwide. In other words, when you have we're not just talking about the Palestinians, the Afghan refugees, all of this, they didn't get the same attention that the Ukrainians get. And this is not to undermine the humanitarian classes or anyone, but it has to to be Europe has to rethink its strategy long terms. So it cannot ask Algeria for help while the European countries still ignite or have causes to undermine Algerian stability. So on the one hand, you tell, help me, but at the same time, you put a nail in my coffin. So it's absurd, and the Europe has to come to terms with that.
Thank you indeed. And as a final question, and very briefly, Mr. Shuaib Boutamin, how can you see the world bearing this crisis? Because according to analysts and observers, Europe's energy crisis is going to get worse. It's only going to get worse. So how is the world going to bear the cost? And is Algeria safe from such repercussions?
Okay, I believe that Europe and the world is they're taking a very heavy burden in kind of energy bills in the upcoming winter. So the situation is critical and very difficult for the Europeans in general and for all the world. What I want to say about the crisis is not really an energy crisis, but related to the food. Because we can, from the gas, the fossil energies, we can get fertilizers to boost agriculture. So, and with this high spiking prices, skyrocketing prices of gas, so we cannot really get the agricultural products. And that's why I say that the food crisis is related to the energy crisis.
Absolutely.
I believe that Algeria is more than safer in kind of more than safe in kind of energy. I want to say that Algeria has answered okay to all the calls from European leaders. Algeria did many efforts. We increased our export of gas to Italy by 6 billion cubic meters of gas this year. Is coming to be done by the end of the year. We did many efforts as we discovered many gas in Hasirmal, close to the facility in Adrar. This is part of the efforts. And Algeria just held meeting with Mali and Niger and Nigeria to
secure stability.
And
the discussion is very exciting.
And to grow the GSTP gas project to the Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. The discussion was really exciting. Thank you so much, Dr. Hamoud Salhi, Mr. Shuaib Boutamin, for all these thorough analysis. And thank you, dear viewers, for keeping it here on All 24 News. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, and we're going to have to leave the conversation there. Bye for now.